Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 98. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at BJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. As usual, I've just finished a nice hot cup of coffee. Hot being the key word there. We're both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip, John.
Awesome, Nick. Hey, today on the chalkboard that we share across states, it looks like the topic is me.
Yes, the topic is you, John, because you're an interesting kind of guy. So here's what I want you to think about. When you write the John White memoir, how would you reflect back on that 1-year anniversary at Google Cloud? That's what we want to hear about. Does that sound good?
Well, I don't know about the John White memoir part, but I think, it's just about my 1-year anniversary at Google Cloud. So, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's been going on there.
1 year, that's a big deal. 1 year in the same role. So remind us what you do for Google exactly. Job title, responsibilities, all the good stuff.
Sure. So I'm a customer engineer at Google Cloud, which is the public cloud provider part of Google, and that is a pre-sales technical engineering role. So, different places call it different things: system engineer, sales engineer, pre-sales technical engineer. Sometimes it's called a solution architect, although at Google Cloud, that's a slightly different role. But that's it. I'm the frontline technical resource for a couple salespeople, as they try to make sales. And I'm their technical expert at the Google Cloud product portfolio. And I am the one who talks about, the technical capabilities of the product. When we're customer facing, I can advise them and come up with a technical point of view and strategy for how to talk about the sales territory and maybe the segment of the market that they're covering, that kind of thing. And then, I help them overall with their territory management. That's the job. It's very, very similar to the role that I had at VMware before I left VMware, and it's just it's obviously slightly different in the execution.
And how big is your customer base, roughly, and how many account reps do you support?
So right now, I support 2 reps. I think that's the model that we're using in the San Francisco region. Out of the San Francisco office, that seems to be what we're doing. And really what that means is I'm the stateful customer engineer. That is, I'm the one who maintains state and, is always on call for those 2 reps. Now, that we're slightly different in our organization. It doesn't mean I'm the only customer engineer that works with them. But that's how we do it. Now, as for the number of customers, I have, I would say about 15. I don't have a more accurate count, and they range in size from kind of startup, born in the cloud customers to extremely large healthcare, hospital accounts. So runs the gamut. Although they are all in what Google Cloud calls the enterprise space. It's just Google Cloud might define that slightly differently than VMware did.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. What about the sales engineering job itself at Google Cloud instead of a role like tech marketing, management, or some other path that maybe you thought could be an option for you?
Sure. So I think, as I was progressing in my career at VMware, I did not take the time to set myself up to pursue a different type of job role. That is, I wasn't pursuing, excellence in solution engineering, which is what the title was at VMware, and at the same time setting myself up to do more tech marketing. I wasn't setting myself up to also be a people manager. I wasn't pursuing that like aggressively. Either one of those things. I wasn't aggressively pursuing becoming a product manager. I think there were things that I was doing that could have started me along that road. It's just I left before that really came to fruition. But so I think like when the opportunity, and came along to start looking for a different role, I was looking for that same role.
Makes sense. And even at another company, the responsibilities could be very different.
Yeah, that's true. I think the biggest difference is probably not the kinds of things that I'm doing. It's just the organization that I'm doing them in, and like the type and the customer mix. That's different, and of course the products.
What about the team structure, for example? Your team of peers or team of specialists that you work with?
Sure. Yeah. I think that is different. Well, the first, biggest thing is that we're kind of in a pooled model. So I would say group of 15 people that my manager manages, like we can all kind of mix and match, and so we have different strengths when it comes to product mix. So when there's a gap in my knowledge about a product, I can bring in one of my peers who has more experience in that product, and they can help fill in or even take primary, on a specific project, or even take over as primary as the kind of stateful customer engineer for that customer. So we can swap in and out that way. A little bit more freedom to do that. Usually it's, you start working as in an additive way as opposed to swapping out, but, there's the freedom to do that as well. We have very similar overlay structures, which is, product specialists who specialize in things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, for example, or analytics, or databases and storage. Those are all specialized specialists who are co-located with us. That is like there's an entire team of those specialists in the same San Francisco office. Obviously, right now, none of us is going into the office because we're recording in late 2020 when everybody's worked from home because of COVID. But, while we were in the office, they were all physically present there. There's a more national team, some national teams that cover things like G Suite. Like all G Suite business is handled by a national team. So I don't even really get involved in that except to, there's an opportunity. So we'll bring in the G Suite specialist. There's also like a security and compliance team. That's a really big deal when it comes to cloud services. So if there's an engagement where somebody needs to understand those things, then I bring in, there's a center of excellence. So there's a customer engineering team for that. Same thing for like some of our overall security products, even yet another security overlay team. So yeah, some of the recent acquisitions have their own teams as well. So I think there's a company called Apogee that we bought, and they have their own customer engineering team. It's more API management, I think. And they kind of get, eventually mixed in with the application modernization team. But right now they're just completely separate.
But just to make it clear for all the listeners, you have assimilated to G Suite as a standard, right?
Yes. Like, ironically, I saw it as a big gap. I know that you're joking about that, but I saw it as like, ooh, I don't want to transition to G Suite. And it was one of the reasons. It was an odd reason, but I was like, ooh, I don't know if I can walk away from PowerPoint and Excel and Word, but I'm a complete, convert now. Now that I've worked in real time, collaboration within those tools, and, assigning people tasks from within a Google Doc. or a sheet, like you just tag a specific section and say, hey, at, so and so, I need you to fill in this information here, and they get a notification, and they can even start like jumping in the dock and working, right alongside you while you're still in it. And that's, I'm fully converted to that. It's great. I still think that like there's no Visio. So if you're a heavy Visio user, you need to add in other things, but there's cloud services that we use. So yeah, I've been pretty happy with G Suite.
Nice. Hey, it's all about the tools. You have to like what you use so you can be productive. That's
Right,
great.
right.
And I'll have to give you a hard time, of course. Now, I think there was a difference in the way compensation was structured in this role compared to the last one. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think that, there's a couple things there. For anybody who is in this role of, pre-sales technical resource, there is usually what happens is that you're assigned to a territory and there's a rep that's covering that territory, and you have the same attainment that representative in that territory has. So, if I'm covering rep A and rep A makes, 105% of their quota, then I'm making 105% of my quota. And if you're covering two reps, then, whatever their quota adds up to is your total quota. Now, and I'm sorry if, not everybody who's listening to this podcast works in a pre-sales technical role. So, they don't understand necessarily that we even have sales quotas. Now, we're supposed to, really not worry about our quota attainment in general, and basically act as a technical resource without regards to, sales attainment. So we are compensated in a very different ratio than a sales rep. So I feel like at Google, sales reps, like most of their like they might have like 40% of their total projected total compensation is they earn on a weekly basis or, bi-monthly basis, and then 60% is from quota attainment. So in the industry, that's known as, 40-60, right? Your baseline is 40% and your attainment covers 60%. And, I think at VMware, I was 75-25. So 75% of my, my compensation was just base, right? And so at Google Cloud, it's a little bit lower. It's 70-30. So it's slightly different. Now, the way that quotas work, though, is completely different. And that is my quota is basically aligned with my manager's quota. So my manager covers not, one sales manager, but two different sales managers. So the total quota that those two sales managers has is my manager's sales quota, and as a result, my sales quota. So all of my colleagues and I have that same sales quota. So that's why we can mix and match on deals, according to our expertise, is because we don't actually have there's no disincentive to keep somebody from coming in and, I don't know, stealing the glory, or sorry, maybe it works the other way. Why would I help somebody other than out of the goodness of my heart or culturally on their deal if they, if I do an amazing job and they, make a whole lot of money because of that deal, but there's no sales compensation when it comes to me. So there's not really a strong incentive to help out your colleagues from a sales compensation perspective. And at least at Google Cloud, in the enterprise space, sometimes you have these extremely large deals where there's a ton of different workflows, and it might expand and expand, to, a huge, massive, complicated overall deal. And there's a bunch of different technical lines that need to be chased down, and it might honestly be more than one person can do. So at that point, bringing in additional people becomes very easy because everybody's sales compensation is aligned. with that. And even though you're only talking about 30% of your total compensation, it's still, enough to sting if somebody else makes attainment for, a giant deal, and you helped with, 30 to 40% of that deal when you're not getting compensated for it. So, there's just a strong collaborative environment, and, just keeping track of what everybody's working on and whether they need help at any given moment. So I was also, felt a lot more free to ask for help, right? Because I was taking up people's time, but it was also in their interest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And money drives behavior, so it makes,
Right. Well,
yeah.
theoretically, you should have like a strong cultural basis where you say, "Oh no, you just pitch in, even though it's, not in your best. It doesn't. Your compensation is not necessarily aligned." I think that grates on people, because usually it's your manager or director that's asking you to do that, and their compensation is aligned with you helping out. So if I'm in a role where there is no compensation for me helping somebody else, and my manager asked me to do that, and I have the time to do that, then, culturally I should, but economically there's no incentive to do that. And my manager or, director might say, but you should do it because out of cultural goodness and for the good of the company. It's easy for them to say that because their compensation is aligned with you doing that. Right. So, it's a little bit tough to hear from somebody whose economic interest is in you helping, when it isn't in your economic interest to do so. So, at least right now at Google Cloud, into the current compensation structure, which obviously could always change, that is wiped away. There's all the economic incentive to do so.
Nice. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that before you shared that with me. That's good to know. Of course, you're going to find that out in the initial interviews if you're interviewing for a pre-sales technical role. Always good to make sure you understand the compensation structure and that you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, the portfolio that you cover is a bit different. How big is the set of products compared to what you covered when you were at VMware?
Ooh, yeah. I think the VMware portfolio was always growing, and it was just starting to expand out of, what one could reasonably start to, feel comfortable knowing at a 200 level across the board. And I think at Google Cloud, it is larger than that already. And specifically because the types of products can be like extremely deep and complex to understand at a 200 level, to be able to, like, say, directly demo all of the product portfolio is just unreasonable. To do like a deep G Suite demo, for example, is probably out of my capabilities, just because I don't even know, the sales process and the driving factors to do that. Same thing for like deep, like machine learning, like that's a fairly deep discipline. Artificial intelligence, and machine learning is something that when you're pitching it, you're often pitching it to people with backgrounds like, data scientists might have like a master's or PhD in that activity, or, that specific thing, as a subspecialty in either biology or, computational biology or computer science, and computational statistics. Like these are all things that, you have to have deep knowledge in order to really intelligently talk to somebody who is in that field. So either you focus on it, fairly deeply, and that's like one of the few things that you focus on, or you just bring in a specialist. So I just, it's going to take time, way more time to get deep on that. And the same thing for just pure analytics. It's just not something that I had deep knowledge of, data warehousing, data lakes. I think I might have said earlier on, when I first came over, that, I really couldn't have told you what a data warehouse was before I came to Google Cloud, and that was after 4 years at VMware. and 15 years in IT before that. And it was, you know, 10 years ago, like, I could have related it to business intelligence somehow, something about analytics, but it, couldn't have really told you what a data warehouse was and what the goal of a data lake was and how it was different from a data warehouse. So that's deep knowledge. And then even databases, right? Understanding, 8 different database engines is, and what you use them for. Like, each one of those things can be like a fairly deep dive, different types of storage. And then, different security products, networking in the cloud. So, I would say the breadth, and it's tough to compare, but like, I think the depth of knowledge that is required to be, really proficient and excellent in each of the different areas is a steeper climb. That's the difference, I think.
Okay. Well, you're the kind of guy who's up for that kind of intellectual challenge, I know.
Yeah.
Now, what about this, John? I remember when you first started, you made the transition from 100% field-facing solution engineer role to a customer engineer at Google who was expected to come into the office each day.
Right. Yeah, that was a big shift. And that was a rough one. It added to my commute, my daily commute. It became like a daily 40 to 50 minute commute. And at VMware, I would go into the VMware headquarters because I'm located in the Bay Area. And, that was kind of a cool thing to take advantage of, office space and meeting rooms and, snacks and stuff like that. But I could really pick and choose when I was doing that, weekly, every other week, so on and so forth. It was my choice. And that was a big shift. And it was a big change, but the benefits were really high, because I was face to face with my colleagues, face to face with those technical specialists, and they aren't just people that you're on a conference call with, and then all of a sudden you meet at like a mixer or something for the first time, 4 months later. And, or at, annually at a sales kickoff, right? It's like the only times that you really maybe see some of these people. And, that is, you can see them, a bunch of times just passing in the hallway. A thought occurs to you when you see somebody, you can just go to lunch, like, cause you're going to lunch every day with a bunch of people. So the cross-pollination and hearing what other people are working on and getting ideas and asking your dumb questions in a social context, all that stuff, just gets smoothed out. And I, now that we have to work from home, I really miss all that stuff. I don't miss the commute. I will say that, but I miss all of the, like, the benefits that came from mixing on a daily basis in a face-to-face way, and especially eating meals together. Like, we would have breakfast meetings, because you could get breakfast at the Google offices and, just talk about stuff. That was a great way to meet, people that were just joining the team. Same thing for going to lunch. It was just such a benefit. And so moving to work from home, I really miss that.
So you're telling me they don't have smoked meat as a service for free through Google because of working from home?
No, I'm totally DIY for smoked meats.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, you take what you can get, right? How about this one, John? You had a lot of experience in that sales engineer role when you first started at Google Cloud, but anytime you start at a new company, you lack that internal knowledge of the organization and its practices. What was that like going into it for you?
Yeah. Oh, man. That was a much bigger deal than I thought, and it took a lot longer to come to terms with it than I thought. Sitting here at about a year, I'm thinking, okay, I've gotten my mind around it. Not only like the structure of the teams, but also the processes of involving them. I think it literally has taken a year for that to happen. Like which teams do what and when do you call them in? Like that was a very, very difficult thing for me to learn. Like we have, like I mentioned, overlay specialists, and even that process of calling them in and the best practices for doing that, I think I kind of got settled into that at like 9-10 months. There's another team, like I mentioned, like the solution architect role, is a different one from the customer engineering role at Google Cloud. And when do I call in those solution architects? They actually tend to be more code driven, as well as having like a product overlay. So they've worked on integrating actually some of those products and writing the code and can provide some of the examples for doing that. Product managers, I think that's, very similar to involving product managers at VMware. So that wasn't as much of a change. We have a new role and title in the customer engineering organization called an enterprise cloud architect. And their differentiation from a customer engineer is very subtle, right? Very, very subtle. Tend to be a little bit more program management experience and just handling multiple threads on complex deals and that kind of thing. So, that just like when you would need one, when you need to involve somebody, any one of those roles it just takes time to understand. Like, you need to have it explained to you like 20 times, right? Because you're learning so many other things, at the same time. And I just found like that need to be humble was just so important to say, I am not an expert at this, and that's okay. I will gain competence over time at when to involve whom, and I just need to repeatedly ask for guidance on this and have it explained to me over and over again. And then actually one of the things that I've taken upon myself is to, when I identify these types of things, I'm writing a document on this. It's like, this was something that took me a long time to figure out at Google Cloud. And if you're joining Google Cloud or joining the customer engineering organization at Google Cloud, you need to, here's a document for you to understand this. And as an outsider, who had to learn this, like it's maybe those types of things that are maybe institutional knowledge and like, it's very clear to people who've been on the inside for a long time. Oh, this is when you do this and this is how to do it. Like that is not clear to an outsider. So only an outsider knows when that documentation and that knowledge is tribal and not explicit, right?
It sounds like you're documenting your career progression lessons to share with others.
Yeah.
So that eventually it's going to lead to your own progression. Maybe you can show that to your manager that you've done it and you've helped onboard this many new people, and that helps you get that next raise.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't really thought about that in that way. I think I was just thinking about it in a, here's some sandpaper to remove the friction, right? Because it's taken me, like I said, the better part of a year to figure some of this stuff out. And I think that's too long a time, right? It should be explicitly stated somewhere and then maintained by somebody. So since I haven't been able to find it, maybe it has been, explicitly stated, maybe even during like orientation, but then that orientation material is stuff that you just might not revisit ever again, and then new positions are constantly being created. Like there's a solution manager position, which is different from a product manager position and a solution architect position. So what does that person do, and when do you involve them in your deals, or opportunities, right? So, I think when I was joining, like somebody asked, like, well, what do solution managers do? And the person was like, I don't think that's a role that we have at Google Cloud. And somebody's like, I'm a solution manager, and it's just been created in the last like month, right? So, obviously, like anybody who had tribal knowledge of everything before, that tribal knowledge is no good for this, brand new role. So on and so forth. Yeah. It's, maybe, I don't know, like maybe if I maintain this document and get a lot of feedback from other people and, improve the quality of the output, then it could be, a document that could be presented to new customer engineers and sales reps during their orientation. That's a very strong possibility. And, and then maybe it could be a career enabler for me. But I mean, regardless, I think it just needs to be done. So, yeah.
So you did it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about the customer base? It seems a little bit different than what you experienced at VMware.
Yeah. So I mentioned that, there's probably a lot more cloud native customers, especially out of San Francisco, than, in the overall Google customer portfolio, customer mix. VMware is a product that traditionally gets installed on physical computers that people own, and more and more that there's, Google or VMware as a service. That was always available through service providers, and now it's starting to be available through the mega cloud providers as well. But it's still, heavily, I would say, weighted in, traditional IT shops, traditional companies on premises. And that is just not true at Google Cloud. I mean, there's still a lot of that, but you might as well have like a heavy cloud user who, was just never a VMware customer at all. Maybe they've never bought a product from, Dell or HP and never bought routers from Cisco, right? So, but they could still spend millions of dollars a year in technology because they're born in the cloud and they just never, bought any of that stuff, from the traditional on-premises providers. So, yeah, that's, I think, kind of, that the customer mix is different. Now, that being said, I'm working, like a lot of my customers come from what I would call, greenfield. Like they're not already customers of Google Cloud, the vast majority of my customers. So that is a situation that, despite my seniority at VMware, I had never worked in that position before. I kind of missed out on the group of, VMware solution engineers or systems engineers who were trying to bring VMware to people for the first time. By the time I made it to VMware, it was, the established how you do IT in traditional IT shops is through virtualization, not vast fields of like, bare metal operating system installs. At Google Cloud, cloud is not necessarily new to people who are buying technology. A lot of people don't run Microsoft Exchange on premises anymore. They subscribe to Office 365, but that doesn't mean that they're comfortable with cloud technologies for huge parts of their portfolio, or a lot of their intellectual property sitting in a cloud provider instead of on their servers, right? So change that, like that's really different. And even if they are, they probably have bought from Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure because Amazon was first, and they probably have a big relationship with Microsoft already because of Office 360 and Windows Server and all those things, right? So it's a very different job to be breaking into a customer from the first time rather than when I was a VMware solution engineer, systems engineer, where the customers were already, I would say, probably already spent $1 million on VMware at some point in, over their history. So really what I was doing was managing their growth and then trying to help them understand the value of additional products within the VMware portfolio they just hadn't thought about. They had thought about VMware only as a hypervisor company, and I wanted to help them understand the different parts of the VMware portfolio that they were maybe missing out on. At Google Cloud, sometimes they haven't thought about Google as anything except a search company and, Android, and they haven't thought about Google at all as a technology provider. Is that even possible? Is any of the stuff that Google's doing relevant to what I'm doing? And if so, like, can I just buy it from Amazon, which I'm already doing it, or Microsoft, who I already buy stuff from, right? So it's just a very, very different job.
At least you could put them on the map with Google Maps. Think about it like that.
Right. Well, no, actually, because I don't represent. That's another thing that I don't represent in Google
Right.
Cloud. But there's a whole separate
Anyway,
Maps team. But I know you're making a joke, and I'm smiling and laughing on the inside.
as usual. How about that? How about the career progression lesson from this particular new customer interaction?
Yeah, I think that it's a muscle for pre-sales technical people that they should probably be exercising, because you never know when you might be working at a place that is doing that, right? So, talking to customers about, a different line of business that your organization has is very closely aligned with talking to a customer who hasn't bought anything at all from you. But it's different. It's different. Making that first sale to a customer is different. And even that, I'm not sure, coming to Google Cloud is a fair representation of that. Like, I would say getting a call back when you call in, you say, hey, I work at Google, is maybe a little bit easier than if you leave a message saying that you're from a startup that nobody's ever heard of. Right.
Sure,
So
it
it's
carries some weight.
yeah. Yeah. And I think within the technology industry, people do think about Google as like a giant machine learning and, data science type of operation, if they're inside the industry. So, yeah. And it's also not fair to say that they've never bought anything from Google. Like, most of the companies we call on, like, buying Google ads has probably one of their top marketing line items, right? But it's just a completely different relationship from the ads team, which works, and it's completely outside of Google Cloud. So it's not the same business, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of an exercise in education when I think about it, because you're educating this potential customer on some things your company does that they might not know about.
Yeah,
It's not that you weren't doing that before, but you're presenting the company and this whole new area of innovation that they just didn't know about to them for the first time.
yeah, that's exactly true. That you said it very succinctly. Um,
I
I,
just pulled a John White on John White. I like that on record.
well,
It
it's just
wasn't a question, it's just a statement.
then it's definitely a John White.
But back to the questions. How
Yeah,
about that new customer segment being healthcare? I don't think that was something that you covered before.
that's true. Yeah. So at VMware, healthcare was a very specific vertical segment, and I wasn't in that vertical, right? Um, at Google Cloud, technically, there's a very specific list of healthcare customers that are also in a vertical focus, which I'm also not in. So I'm kind of working in the vertical while not being part of the vertical. And internally, what that means is, like, if you have a vertical team, it's probably a specific sales management team and a specific sales reps, which are all, inside the umbrella of that vertical. So my manager isn't a customer engineering manager of healthcare and life sciences reps. Customer engineers. And the sales manager that my reps report to is not a sales manager of healthcare and life sciences reps. Like, it's just mixed in. So, that is also a new experience. The good news is that we can take advantage of all the learnings and all the stuff that the healthcare and life sciences vertical team is doing and pumping out, and just apply it to our customers, right? So that's always a good thing. And some of the expertise that their, like, healthcare and life sciences CE team, customer engineering team, is has learned. We can call in on them and maybe even shadow them when they're when they're doing those kinds of things to get better oriented. But yeah, it's very, very different. I would say, like, you know, that's that was a big change to just have to learn about a completely new industry, or have to learn about an industry and all of its jargon, their buying patterns, their motivations. Before, not that much of what I was doing was like a specific vertical, right? So if I had a silicon, chip manufacturer, then I had to be vaguely aware of the stuff that they focused on, or an auto manufacturer that was not one of the, big three, big five, big however many. Then, I, would kind of, learn a little bit about it, but not really be that industry focused, to having, 80% of my customers in a specific, vertical focus. Well, now you have to really understand and have an opinion about how technology is used in that industry, and bring that point of view along with you, and understand how the product portfolio is in that. And that's just very, very different from what I did before. So, a really big growth opportunity for me. I think it's been really exciting, that part, just learning so much about an industry.
That's cool. Yeah, it's kind of fresh and new.
Yeah.
I could see that. Now, how about this overwhelming new set of products that you didn't have that much experience with going into it? I remember you being a little nervous about that at first.
Yeah. Still nervous, have my head around it a little bit better a year in. Like, it's taken the better part of a year to get comfortable with that. And I think a big part of that is just, again, the need to be humble. We had a whole architecture certification that, is kind of one of the deliverables in the first 12 weeks. And you have, kind of 8 weeks, upfront to do training on that, and really not have to be customer facing at all. So there's a big block of time that's, there just for your ramp up. And that's amazing and great. It's also not really enough time to really be competent on so many different products, like I said, with such a depth of complexity about them. So it's taken me a year, like I said, to get my head around that. And, I was looking back at, I think, one of the episodes that we did. I think it was probably our, the episode 23. Yeah. Which was, I think, my 3-year review at VMware.
That's right.
Yeah. And I said it took like a year to get to like competency in the job. And then you have to work at being proficient at it, like, the next step up. And that's the same. It's just, I thought, hey, now that I've done it once before, like, I can be, so much better at that. And no, it still took a year to get competent and then work on being proficient. So, what does that say? Is that a me thing? Hopefully, the stuff that I went through, I can document well enough so that other people can, have an accelerated timeline. I just don't know. But I think that being open to being humble, and knowing that I am not an expert at these things, and I don't need to be an expert, and all I have to do is work on gaining competency, and not be afraid to ask what might seem like stupid questions in an open forum in front of my peers, like that, has served me well. Not everybody's like that, right? So every time somebody else has come on, I've, offered, I was like, hey, if you want to ask like one person who's not going to judge you because, they're not worried about being judged, feel free to ask me. And if nothing else, if I don't know the answer, I'll ask it in the open forum if you're worried about that, right? Because like I said, I'm just not afraid of asking what might be perceived to be a dumb question, because if I don't know it, then I probably do need to know it, right?
Yeah. Well, that brings up a question I had, John. It sounds like if I want to get a job at a technology company or some place that requires some knowledge of this portfolio of products, I may not have to know that much about them to get the job. Is there hope for the person who applies who may not know anything about the portfolio at all?
So I would say that your best bet is to have one of two things. One is deep domain knowledge. That is, you know a lot about the products. You've applied them, you've helped implement them, and maybe even helped sell them before. Like that's one path. And then the other path is to have also deep domain knowledge, but about technical sales, right? Or whatever like the job role is. So you've done the job role just in a different domain, not having that same product mix. So those are the two ways. So there's a third way, which is becoming a little bit more common because at least in the specific job that we have and, pre-sales technical engineers, like there's just not enough of us out there. So more and more companies are investing in ways to recruit people straight out of college to come in as an extremely junior version of that role. And I think it's interesting because probably nobody ever thinks, oh, I want to be in technical sales, like when they're in junior high or high school or college. It's just a role that I had never heard of. I'll say this. It's a role I had never heard of, and my father had the title. Okay, he was a technical sales representative for Eastman Kodak, and I just never connected that with what I'm doing until well after I was doing it. Okay, so with the benefit of me having a family history of doing that thing, just not in the technology industry, in the photography industry and photo finishing, I still didn't know the role existed. Okay. So, recruiting into it is just a tough thing. So that is, that third way. And then I think, that, opening up different pathways, I think is going to be a big advantage to companies that are trying to recruit into this type of role, because it's a big risk, right? The ideal candidate is somebody who's done the job in a different part of the country, right? And they just happen to be moving to your geography. Like that's the ideal candidate, already does the job, but working for the company that you're working for, and you're just, oh, I happen to be recruiting and you happen to be moving here. That's the ideal candidate, right? And
of course,
that doesn't actually solve the problem for the company, which is, hey, we need more people to do this role because we're expanding as an organization, right? Hopefully expanding. And Google Cloud is expanding, trying to expand very, very quickly. So has like probably an even more acute, need for that recruiting, and has probably a more acute recruiting problem. So
yeah, that makes sense. Good points.
So if you feel like you have an additional way to get here, you, dear listener, let me know because I would be interested in knowing those alternative paths. Like I don't claim to know them all, right? So if you think that there's some other way, like I think that that would be great. And I would say I've recommended people with deep like pre-sales engineering like knowledge, and they still haven't like necessarily even gotten like a formal interview, like started the what we used to call the on-site interview process, just because they didn't have like a general knowledge of like public cloud. And you still needed like a baseline of that in order to even probably get started. And it's probably true at VMware. Like, if I came in with like a heavy telecommunications, pre-sales technical engineering background, but didn't know anything about virtualization or desktop or security products or public cloud, which are, kind of the main areas that VMware has, then probably wouldn't be a good fit to even start that process. Probably would say, hey, get some knowledge about that first, if you have no knowledge about it. So, same thing at Google Cloud.
Yeah, excellent points. Well, on that note, John, I want to time check us here because I don't want to go too long. Are there any other career lessons learned that you want to add real quick before we wrap this episode? By the way, hint, hint, we're going to go to a part 2 because there's more to the story.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're like halfway into what we were prepared for. So yeah, I would say, for somebody who's breaking in, like just identifying like what it is that you want to do, early on, and being open to, kind of non-traditional roles, and listening to, podcasts like ours, but there's other ones like, for example, there's 2 podcasts that I can think of on pre-sales technical engineering. And, we can put the links in the show notes about that, and people who have, broken into, we had Ramsey Marjaba on, and he has, his like SE community that he's even built. So, we can refer people over there. But, if you're just trying to get into IT in general, like that's a non-traditional role anyway. Like how do you, most people don't have like a college degree in IT management, right? Like what school has that? There's a few, but not a bunch. So, yeah, like think, open your mind up and educate yourself to the different types of jobs that are out there. So, you can go to various jobs, various companies, and say like what technical jobs are available. Software engineering is a very traditional role in, but like what are the other types of roles? Is there analytics? Is there database management? Is there, what other things are out there that maybe you could gain expertise in, or maybe you have that expertise already, and be like, not like this traditional job role, like doctor, dentist, accountant, lawyer, software engineer starting to become one of those things, right? But what other things are there? Project management, database management, technologist in general. So anyway, I'll stop.
High school math teacher.
Yeah, teacher, college professor, very traditional. Yeah. So with that, I think that's it from me before we wrap. So okay. How about you? Did you have any other questions before we get out of here?
No, I'm going to save them for the sequel, John.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Just a reminder that we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.